say Zon Bechu in the Shoshone language. I'm a member of the Eastern Shoshone people from the area of Wyoming. And in fact, our lands used to include Yellowstone. So I would like to begin with a small prayer. We use the sweetgrass to ask for help, for assistance from the Creator. We believe that the smoke carries our thoughts and our prayers to the Creator. And because I'm talking about things today that are emotional for me, emotional for our people, it's good to begin this way. So I'll just begin with a small prayer and then I'll begin. So thank you all very much for coming today. It means a lot for me to be here in your home in Gorno and to be in Russia. It's my first trip to Russia and to the Altai, and I respect your lands and your people very much. And so it means a great deal to me. This picture above is a picture of my home. Where I'm from. This is my backyard. It's where we gathered foods and medicines and animals that we use to feed ourselves, to feed our bodies, and this place is very, very special to me. Like I mentioned, from the United States, this is a figure of tribes in the United States. There's over 300 different tribes, and many of them were had specific languages. It was not uncommon for our people to speak 5 or 6 languages at this time, 1600s. Many of the tribes are in the east that are pretty much gone. They've lost their languages because of assimilation, because of cultural genocide. We've been more fortunate in the West to hold on to more of our culture. You can see in the different regions, the people in the South and the Southeast lived a lot differently from my tribe. They had different structures of houses. Many of them lived in the woods, and so their lifestyle and the way they lived reflected from the landscape that they were occupied in. I'm from the Shoshone tribe, which is here. We've been in the Greater Yellowstone area for more than 30,000 years. The archaeological evidence says that it's 13,000 years, but for us as Native people, we believe that it's much longer. So we say 30,000 years, or time immemorial. This is a photo of the way we used to live. As you can see, the teepee is very similar to your aiel. The teepee was made from the hides of buffalo or elk, and it often a teepee of this size would take over 15 animals to make one teepee. So when you have a whole village, you can imagine the amount of animals that it would have taken to gather that. These are Shoshone people. They have a similar lifestyle as the Plains Indians. And in region shown on the previous map, you can see that these tribes lived similarly. But oftentimes we were enemies, and sometimes we were friends. It depended on the relations that we had with one another. This is a photo of my great-great-grandfather. His name was Rabbit Tail. He was a scout for the Army. So when the Army came in, he was one of the people that guided them through the region. The Shoshone people were known for being friendly to the white people. Not all of the tribes were friendly to the white people, as I'll explain in a little while. But we were a warrior. We were a warrior tribe. We were physically fit, but we often didn't live to very old age because of conflicts, because of injuries. But nonetheless, this is how we used to look. This is also a picture of the Shoshone people. The individual in the middle was the last chief of our tribe. His name was Washakie. He was well respected by many tribes and also by the white people that moved into the region. You can see him holding the peace pipe. The peace pipe was a symbol of our spirituality. It was made from a stone called pipestone. It was red in color, and oftentimes it was traded, this particular type of stone was traded from tribe to tribe. So it's possible that this particular pipe is hundreds of years old. And it's also, it was also a way to gain friendship between tribes. It was common to sit down and smoke the pipe, and when you did that, then there would be no more conflict between one another. The leadership of the tribe was a little bit opposite of the way we govern ourselves today. The leadership came from the people. He was a well-respected leader by all of the people, and because of this, he was promoted to his leadership. But he wasn't the only leader. The other guys in the photo are the other leadership. So we had many chiefs. One chief could be for battle. So during wartime, this individual would be in charge of the conflict. Or in peacetime, Chief Washakie, seated in the middle, was the peace chief. Because he was friendly with the white people or the non-natives, we got to stay where we have always been. Many tribes that were in conflict with the government or non-Indian people were given the worst lands or no lands at all. And I'll show an image of the decline of our land base. And when I say Indian people, it's synonymous with Native American. Lots of people say that when Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas, he thought he was in India. I don't necessarily agree with this, because when Christopher Columbus arrived, he saw a people who had a great belief in God. And in Spanish you say Indios. And today in Spanish you say Indios when referring to Native Americans. That was translated to Indian. So we are Native Americans or Indian people. And that's how we refer to ourselves. Again, another image of Chief Washakie. The feather headdress was a symbol of leadership, but also of our respect for the eagle. We believe that the eagle flies the highest and closest to the Creator, which makes it a sacred bird, sacred animal. And so oftentimes the feathers were given one at a time for acts of valor or for your leadership in battle, or for what you do for your community or your people. We share our reservation with the Arapaho people. The Arapaho are from the Great Lakes region. They were our enemies, but they live similarly to us. You wouldn't tell the difference between the Shoshone and the Arapaho, which are in this picture, by just looking. But we have two different languages, two different cultures, and two different value systems. But today we live together. This is how we used to prepare our meat. We would dry it in the sun, and it would be mixed with berries that we would gather during the summertime and made into what we call pemmican. So it was nutritious, and it was easily transportable. But the buffalo was probably the most important animal to us since time immemorial, because it provided food, clothing, shelter, tools. The bones were used, the hooves made into glue, the sinew from the back to make for our bowstrings. The meat was dried. The horns were used for making spoons or eating utensils. So it had many uses. And when Lewis and Clark, the explorers sent by the president in 1804 to explore the West, in their journals that they wrote, they talked of buffalo blanketing the landscape. Millions and millions of buffalo. In 1600, the Shoshone people acquired the horse. The Comanche used to be up here with the Shoshone. And at one time, around 1400s, the Comanche went south to follow herds of buffalo. And when they went south, they carried with them our language and our culture and our belief systems. But there was a time when the European or Spanish came from the south, and they had a battle with the Pueblo people. And the Pueblo, we call it the Pueblo Revolt, where the Pueblo people defeated the Spaniards and pushed them out. And the Spaniards left their horses. And so the Comanche and a couple other tribes acquired the horse and took them north. And when they went north, they met up with the Shoshone, where we are now. And by that time, we were able to trade with other tribes in the north, in what is now the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And so we had the horse for almost 200 years before Europeans arrived. This allowed us to be more mobile. We were able to hunt the buffalo easier. We had more time for our families. We didn't have to move around as much. And so it was a very important turn of events when we acquired the horse. So when we got this horse, we were better able to move around, but we were also able to explore, and we became expert horsemen, much like the people here. And we defended our territories, we defended our lands, we defended our families, our people. We often say we've been fighting terrorism since 1492. These old images depict the way that we used to be. We're modern people now, but we also maintain our traditions, our cultures, and trying to maintain and keep our language. But relations with non-native people was not always good. We had a rich culture, rich belief system, rich in our spirituality, but the non-native people, they tried to take that away from us. I mentioned that the Shoshone people hadn't been found since until 1804. This woman, her name was Sacagawea, she was a scout, she was Shoshone. And she guided Lewis and Clark to the west. Much of the eastern part of the United States was occupied, and many of the Indian tribes were moved out. And so 1492 up until almost 1800, everything to the west of the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River, everything to the east was developing, but much of the west hadn't been explored by non-native people. Many native people lived out in the west, but this line here depicts the route that Lewis and Clark traveled in 1804. They documented much of their discoveries. They identified many new plants, many new animals that had never been seen in the east, including the vast herds of buffalo, elk, pronghorn, antelope, deer, moose, and many, many plant species. In 1806, Lewis and Clark returned to Washington and shared with them their discoveries, shared with them the people that they met. And this created a movement of people. And there was a phrase that people used. It came to be manifest destiny, which the Europeans or non-Indian people believed that they had a divine right to overtake the continent because they believed that non-native people were, because non-Christians, they were lower than themselves, and basically took our lands. They forced us into an assimilation. It began, and it carried on for quite some time. The churches were basically all put in together, and with each tribe they said, okay, the Episcopals go here, the Mormons go here, and they sent these missionaries to our reservations, and they stamped out our language. We were punished for speaking our language. They took the children from the villages, sent them on a train, and took them as far away as they could. And the little kids were punished for speaking their language or carrying on customs. They burned their clothes and they put the modern clothes on them. people began to move west, they did it by train. And so many trails led to the western part of the United States. Gold was discovered in California on the western boundary. So millions of people went west in search of gold. This also created many conflicts with the native people. These conflicts were bad, brutal, bloody, and it was often a practice to take diseased blankets with smallpox and give the blankets to the people. This disease wiped out thousands and thousands of people. They finally discovered that buffalo was so important to the native people that they encouraged the destruction of buffalo herds. They wanted to kill off the buffalo to kill the Indians, to kill the native people. So on these trains, they would have competitions to see who could shoot the most buffalo in a day. So you can see 300 a day for pleasure, 100,000 for tongues, for excitement, for whiskey. And so oftentimes the buffalo was just shot and left. Sometimes they took only the hides and the tongues, and they left the buffalo to rot on the plains. So after some time, there were, instead of blankets of buffalo, blankets of bones, just littering the prairie, littering the plains. This was one of the saddest times in our history, the destruction of buffalo, not only for native people, but for all people in the United States. The hides were then shipped east by train and were made into belts for different machinery during the Industrial Revolution. The bones were then gathered from the prairie and also sent by train to make fertilizer and fine china. This is how many they killed. These are just the skulls. So a very sad time, but nonetheless part of our history. This is a map showing the distribution of buffalo in the 1820s and 30s, from Texas all the way to Saskatchewan, Canada. They were in vast numbers, and this is just shortly after Lewis and Clark returned back to Washington, and after they spread the news of what they found, and people began to travel west, you can see the decline. And so by 1890, the dark patches are the only places where buffalo were left. By 1900, the only place they were left was in Yellowstone. 60 million buffalo to less than 100 in 100 years. This map shows the area of the Shoshone. You can see the state, the modern state of Colorado here. This is Wyoming, North Dakota, or South Dakota, Nebraska. So our territory of the Shoshone was like this. Included Yellowstone to the south. We were neighbors with the Crow. Oftentimes we were enemies enemies, other times we were friends. But the decline of the buffalo made it hard to be friends because we had to compete for food. The Arapaho were in Colorado, the Cheyenne people, the Ute, the Apache, the Navajo. We all had our distinct territories. For us, our treaties or our negotiations with the federal government began in 1863. In 1863, we signed a treaty we call the Treaty of Fort Bridger. In this treaty, we were granted or given a territory that was 44 million acres, about 22 million hectares. And it was included this whole area here, half of Yellowstone, and to the south, a very, very large portion. And white people began to see the rich resources that were in the area and made a new treaty, the Treaty of Fort Laramie. And this happened 5 years later, in 1868, where our reservation was reduced from 44 million acres, 22 hectares, to 2 million acres. We lost 40 million acres in 5 years. Today, this is our reservation. In 1897, they found gold again on our reservation, and so they took away more land, including this area. This was also a place where the Oregon Trail was going through, and the federal government wanted to protect the settlers that were moving through, and so they pushed us further north to reduce conflicts with non-native people. In 1906, they wanted to take more land from us because of the rich timber that we have in the northern part of our country. And so they took away the north part of the reservation north of the Wind River. In 1939, we were able to acquire back some of what was taken, except for the white part in the middle. In 1887, the federal government passed an act called the Dawes Act, where they said, we don't want these Indians to live in the community anymore. We want them to become more individualistic. We don't want them to have a chief system anymore. We want them to have a government like the federal government. So, with the Dawes Act, they said, you can take 160 acres, 80 hectares, and if you use it efficiently, after 20 years, you can ask for title to claim your land. When 20 years was up and the people went to ask for title to their land, the federal government said, did you use it efficiently? And by use it efficiently, they meant, did you farm and ranch it? Of course, we were not farmers and ranchers. So they took the lands that were not farmed and ranched, and they advertised them to non-native people in the East, and sold our lands for pennies per hectare. So the Dawes Act opened up reservations for non-native people. So the area included